Well, Farnaz, it's a pleasure to be sharing with you the Fireside Chat today. Think of me as someone of the audience. I just have the luxury of being here and ask you these questions. As a fellow engineering leader, I've been reading through, Linktree vision and plan over the last few years. And, some of the questions I have for you as a CTO are mainly, what was pushing, we'll be trying to covering today the why and the how for this vision of adopting AI, or maybe a little bit more aggressively going to, leaning into AI to change the organization and to build what is called like the AI native teams. So you as a CTO, what kind of mindset and ideas and experiments you had to kind of drive this vision and lead?
Every time I've switched jobs, honestly, it's been due to despite the fact that I've loved the company's got so big that I felt, communication breaks down, you end up having too many layers, bureaucracy kicks in. So every time I've switched, it's been I want to be in a smaller place where I can move fast, where I can know the names of everybody around me. And that honestly was our biggest motivation. We saw that AI is catching up. Some of the tooling is becoming more and more advanced. And when we were doing the planning for this year, we were thinking, how can we avoid what happens when a company gets bigger? Can we curb that growth a little bit and get efficiency through other mechanisms? And obviously AI was a big one. And as a result, kind of avoiding communication breakdown, coordination breakdown, being able to pivot fast. We're still a small company. We need to, there are a lot of initiatives that are almost a startup within a startup. And so we need to be able to change our direction really fast. We need to ensure that we don't create knowledge silos and do kind of hyper specialization so that we can, each one of our teams, each one of our engineers can own everything kind of end to end and build very fast. And so that was the biggest motivator for me. And the experiment, I ended up speaking to both many other leaders across different organizations. And then we had some champions inside of Linktree as well who were really leaning into AI and were demonstrating what can be done if you kind of go in and take advantage of some of these tools the right way. And so that was the motivation. And we decided kind of across the org to kind of lean in and see if we can reduce the rate of growth and gain efficiency through other channels.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I call this the AI imperative. We are all as engineering leaders in positions where we are asked and tasked to look into AI and explore it in building products, but also adoption in terms of development. So as an engineer myself and leading an engineering team, I know that it's very hard to deal with engineers and make them adopt new technologies. So did you get any pushbacks, resistance, hesitation about adopting AI? And if yes, what kind of spectrum you have seen? Is there a mapping towards, how senior people were, or what kind of work they're doing?
There was definitely a ton of pushback. I think maybe I'll count myself in that same group. I think a lot of us become engineers because we like the level of control that engineering gives you. It's very deterministic. And having to let go of that control is hard. I'm old enough to remember, I was going to say engineers are very particular about their tools. I'm old enough to remember the Vim versus Emacs fights, and it was pretty religious. It was, a real fight. And so there was a ton of pushback initially when we first started. But what has helped is really essentially having role models, these champions who are leaning in, but they're also extremely well respected across the engineering org. They are able to deliver impact much faster and much more effectively than the others. Having ways of kind of highlighting both success stories and failure stories, a lot of those kind of helped paint the way so that some of the more skeptics will slowly kind of come along. It was not an easy kind of overnight thing. I think it took us a long time. And there are still people inside the company who are very hesitant about some of the tools that are extremely effective in their day-to-days. We know that it's not going to happen overnight. But I think if we accept that probably AI is moving a lot faster than us humans are willing to, human psychology and changing our habits, if we accept that, I feel it's really important that we lean in. And I think some of us have learned as eng leads, we don't get to be quote unquote dictatorial, but from time to time, it's good to just, be this is what we need. The what is we need to use AI. The how, you guys go and figure it out. There's a reason why you're here, and we trust you to do it the right way. And that's what we started with.
I mean, I like what you said about like AI adoption is not organic. So if you let people decide what to do with it, it's not necessarily going to have the highest level of adoption, or at least in terms of optimization to be used the best way possible to achieve productivity and like build these native teams. What as an engineering leader leading the software engineering team, like is there any specific practices, things you have been running, new concepts that you introduce to the team to ensure that adoption keeps going up?
So one, like the reason it was so important to kind of at a high level just be like, here's what we require is, I think it's important because there's a reason why they say, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes. Like you want to make sure the incentives are out there and people know that expectation is out there. We need you to lean in and use different AI tools. But there's kind of a lot that we did to encourage the right behavior and enable the right behavior, all the way from I personally am a crusader for killing tools. Like having a multitude of tools is distracting. It increases your risk exposure. But with AI, we made an exception. We were like, all right, there's so many tools popping out there, and we want to make sure that we experiment with these tools. So we said you can bring in any tools. There is risk associated with that. Initially, we don't even require a security IT review. However, we are monitoring usage. Some scenarios, of course, you can, but as much as we can, the moment we see a little bit of an uptick, we would come in and review the tools, and like we brought down the review cycle time as well. So like just ensuring that if you want to play with any of these tools, you have the option, you can go play with them. And as a result, by the way, they have been testing many tools and moving away from so many of them because obviously they're not all where they need to be. The other things that have helped, I mentioned having champions inside the team. That's gone a very, very far way for us, I feel. That's a very effective mechanism. And I see different organizations kind of leaning into that. But also, another pitfall that I've seen with AI, and I don't know if this sounds familiar, is a lot of folks first come in expecting whatever AI agent that they're using to be this kind of magic wand that does whatever they want. They're not very familiar with like, all right, how much context do I need to give it? How? Is the tech that I have in my code base going to prevent me from taking advantage of the tools the right way? And so we started, we call it the wins and whoopsies Slack channel. And the idea was we want you to post the wins along with examples, because a lot of times we even forget that we can use AI in like certain scenarios. Like I'm sure we've all experienced that even day to day outside of engineering. But also we wanted to make sure that people know that there's quite a bit of learning from the failures. If you think about AI agents as this kind of intern you have, it's really important. Many of us have had interns to work with before. Many of us have managed. It's really important to kind of figure out, all right, how far can I go with this team? Like, what is the capability of each person? How do I need to kind of tune what I go to them with? If I go to them with too large of a task, with too vague of a task, like I'm not going to get results. And the process around kind of figuring out what you can accomplish with AI agents is somewhat similar. And so ensuring that whoopsies are getting posted also and the collective learning is happening was important to us. So I feel, yeah, again, there's no magic wand. Like there's a multitude of hacks and things that help.
I like what I hope the audience also likes where the conversation is going here. I think we talked about the people side of things, which is one of the most challenging part of like building AI native teams or achieving change or change management in general. The next thing for me is like also the process and the tools. We'll be talking about the tools. I have a bunch of questions for you about the tools, but in terms of process, I mean, I led the roundtable last year here at ELC Annual, and it was about measuring performance or productivity of software engineers. In this aggressive, bet on AI, use AI as much as possible, what kind of metrics and ways you have been able to measure performance and productivity impact by introducing AI?
My answer might be a little disappointing, but having run developer productivity teams in the past and like learning how hard it is to get the right metrics that are not gameable, that are not going to lead you the wrong way, it's extremely hard. Like it's really, really hard. The metrics are there to just point you directionally, hopefully, in the right direction, but like they're not going to be the metrics as we're used to them in some of the more deterministic areas. And so we actually decided not to look at your typical Eng productivity metrics, like, I don't know, time to get your PR in, or, size of the PRs, number of PRs, but rather we're just looking at a bunch of qualitative metrics. We're looking at the level of activity on our Slack channels. We're, of course, not just qualitative, but also what's our token usage? Is the usage of different kind of approved AI solutions that we have inside the company, is it going up, like the number of people who are using them, but also the level of usage from each person? Is it going up? Is it going down? How is it changing across the team? So it was a much more relaxed approach and kind of looking for the vibes a lot more than looking at the exact
Into
metrics.
proxies.
Yeah, pretty much.
Any self-reported like metrics?
We do run surveys, and I can't remember if in our last survey we asked questions about AIs. I need to double check. But in our performance reviews the last 2 times, we have been asking folks about examples of where they have used AIs that's been super successful. And again, I think this is one of those mechanisms that's kind of just putting the incentives top of mind for folks during something as important as performance reviews. So definitely done.
Yeah, it seems that this is beyond engineering too. I mean, usage of AI, adoption of AI is becoming like a metric business is interested in tracking anyway. So that's very interesting. A pattern I have seen in my teams, at least, when I was asking about like AI, interest and, how people are adopting it, I've seen a curve that is the opposite of the seniority level. So the more senior engineers are, the less they are saying that AI is changing their way of work significantly, and the more junior they are, they see a lot of potential of using AI. So, obviously that led me back to the conversation about the people side of things, behavior and why you think AI is not helping you achieve more. And then we have seen some patterns of like software engineers, the less senior they are, they push way more code now with AI that they don't necessarily own and, have the same level of ownership about. And that creates like some PR reviews that take a very long time. So now moving into the tools, we have been talking about the people, the process. For me, the tools are very important. So what tools you have seen or you have experimented with that really achieved, excelled at achieving some results when it comes to software engineering tasks?
Actually, if you don't mind, can I go rogue and go to the
Absolutely.
previous? You were saying something about, like, were you saying that senior engineers are leaning into using AI less?
Reporting that they get less benefit from AI.
Okay, so my data point might be a little different, and that's why I wanted to kind of touch on it. We're actually seeing that it's almost like this like bimodal. Like we're seeing a lot of our less experienced engineers really heavily leaning into using AI. And then we see our most experienced engineers using AI a lot more as well. And I've kind of hypothesized around it. So like take it with a grain of salt as to the why. But also through some of the feedback, I feel like my hypothesis might have some real bit of truth in it. And I think essentially with more senior engineers, I think typically they have worked with a team. And for any of us who've worked with a team or had interns, there are 2 kind of major struggles that you hit. One is it's hard to delegate. It's so easy to just say the amount of time I have to spend to just give context and bring someone up to speed, I'm just going to go do it myself. It's so much faster. And that's the first struggle everybody has. And I feel the challenges with, I don't know, getting an AI agent to do a task for you are somewhat similar. And the other thing is you have to do, people who are very prolific in terms of using AI agents are great at spinning up multiple tasks and kind of multitasking across these tasks. And even I've seen some of the really prolific ones, like they're not even sure which AI model is going to help or which agent is going to help. So they will fire the same task to multiple agents and then like come back and like sift through the results. And that requires a very different model of thinking to what many of us consider that deep, like being in the zone engineering, like focused work, which is something, again, as a more senior engineer, you kind of learn and you can kind of apply to this new world of working with AI agents and AI solutions. So we're actually seeing that kind of binary.
Yeah. And that's why I highlighted the self-reported aspect of this, because at the beginning, one of the biggest challenges for the more senior engineers is like going through all of these PR reviews that are generated by AI, fixing bug, addressing design patterns, gaps and quality gaps. But they are definitely the most effective engineers using AI. They use it the least, but they use it the most effectively, achieving a lot with less. So that's again, the self-reporting is one thing, but when you see the results at the end of the day, completely different. Diving into the tools, again, going back to what was, based on the experiments, the best tools I have seen a lot of great results.
Maybe instead of kind of getting into the specific tools, I think the one specific tool that I can bring up is really Cursor. I think Cursor has managed to kind of stand out compared to some of the other tools out there, although really quickly they're starting to have real competition. So who knows how the landscape is going to change. But as we've been looking for various tools in this space, like we've been looking for the cursors in that world. Like when we were looking for QA tools, we were looking for companies' offerings that showed similar kind of trends to what Cursor was initially saying. They were showing that they are going to be nimble. They are kind of iterating really fast, as opposed to some of the solutions that we saw that were really kind of scratching the surface and not going deep enough. And a lot of what has helped is just like really allowing teams to kind of go in independently, bring some of these smaller, perhaps even like less known tools, test them out, learn from them, and then decide which ones we might want to bring in for the rest of the org or not. But there has been some of the larger tools also that we've moved away from. Like initially we had GitHub
Tell me more about that.
GitHub Copilot and Cursor at the same time. And then slowly we're looking at the data and we're like, it makes sense to switch over and kind of lean in 100% on Cursor and curb some of the cost as well. So we've been good at cutting back in some of those scenarios.
Okay, so some tools are really excelling at achieving some very specific tasks, and others are, based on your experiments, didn't, cut the line and serve your software engineers. I like the idea of like letting engineers decide sometimes on the tools and pick them up. I think historically when we manage, classic maybe stacks, we're a little bit more, go find the more mature platforms, tools, packages and all of that. Don't bring any unknowns. But in the space of AI and how fast things are moving, I think we have been encouraging more, building champions and asking people to go and explore and bring more tools. So is that something that you have been encouraging in general, not just on the tools aspect? Proof of concepts, experimentation, demos and all of that?
Oh, 100%. And you're right. I think generally with tools, as I mentioned, like I'm all for let's not have a multitude of tools. But I feel with AI, we're dealing with a bit of a monster of a different game. And so we wanted to kind of change the rules. And who knows, maybe 2 years down the road, we're going to kind of reverse that requirement as the landscape changes. Also, I think with certain tools, you want to make sure that these are not sort of one-way doors. If you're going to go in and like use a certain tool that will cause a certain kind of dependency that's going to be hard to move away from, in those scenarios, we pay a lot of attention and make sure that we're kind of choosing the best option with open eyes. But in some other scenarios, like, there's a cost to switching, and that's really just the team getting comfortable with a different set of tool. Like it's not as massive, and we can take some risk.
Any insights into building up technical depths? Was there any feedback through the experiments or insights as you adopt more AI, there will be more technical depth that is piling up over time?
Yes and no. So there was definitely pushback because which one of us hasn't seen like bad code from AI agents? So there was definitely a ton of pushback. But slowly kind of building that understanding that like you as the person who is using the agent, who is using AI to understand the code and make changes, like you're responsible for what code you're pushing, and like nothing is changing, the bar is not changing. That was useful to slowly kind of build that culture that like people know that they might get bad results and they need to throw it away and start fresh, depending on how things go. But also, interestingly, I think AI itself has helped us kind of move away from some of our tech that pretty aggressively. We're using AI for preventing vulnerabilities from getting into production with reasonable amount of success. They've used AI for upgrading our dependencies, and that's been successful. And then it's an interesting cycle because some of what I've mentioned is obviously helping, like getting rid of your old dependencies and getting rid of your pruning your dependencies. Like that's all going to help AI do a better job anyway. So it's an interesting self-fulfilling kind of prophecy.
Like self-healing AI involved. Yeah, I mean we've used AI for many of these projects where you need to upgrade your versions of Node or Python, all of that, and we have been tracking some numbers and measure, productivity of all of that, and it has been, extremely interesting. I want to make sure we have a few minutes left, and also there's no session after this one, so I want to open up for a Q&A. If you have any questions, please make sure you have the microphone and ask.
Yeah, feel free to raise hands. We'll have the mic brought over to you. Please just limit your questions to one question, lead with that question, and eat the mic.
Hi, thank you for the great fireside chat. I'm curious about the topic about interviewing because, historically we have done the thing where you try to detect someone is cheating with, AI tooling during interviews. But at the same time, we're obviously pushing the organization to adopt AI tooling. So we want to kind of have an AI tooling first interviewing process. I'm curious to see kind of what you have done, what I've tried, and what works.
Yeah, so great question, and that's been kind of tricky for us. What we've done recently, and we've been testing it, I want to say for 6 to 9 months, and we've been happy with it, is obviously AI is great at kind of 0 to 1 type of tasks. Much better than it could be in debugging or it could be in modifying existing code. So we've come up with a bunch of interview questions that are really all about like use your whatever your tool of choice is, but we want you to add this functionality or we want you to find X many bugs in this code, go wild, use whatever tool you want to use. I have been a little skeptical about requiring our candidates to be very proficient with using AI before they come in, because I think we're still not at a point where, especially if you talk to larger companies, based on my conversations with them, they're not leaning into AI as aggressively. So I want to make sure that we're not going to be in a situation where we're hiring from these great companies with great talent where just unfortunately the opportunity hasn't been there for folks to pick up AI. So we haven't done that just yet, but I'm sure soon we'll get into the territory of, like, even if your company's not leaning in, hopefully you as an engineer have the curiosity to have used AI, and we are going to require it from you. Not there yet, but soon.
Hey, Farnaz, thank you for your time. I'm interested in knowing the tools, AI tools you have used so far in the company. How has been your ROI on those? Can you share some light on that? Thank you.
Honestly, it all depends. Like, as I mentioned, in some of these scenarios, measuring the exact ROI is going to be so tricky that we're going to go with qualitative sort of feedback from the team. In some of the other scenarios, it's been easier. So, for example, I don't know if my friend is here, but we use kind of a tool for incident management, and it's been really good to see how much help we're getting from this tool when we have incidents. We are experimenting with a couple of kind of QAing testing tools. The jury's still out on those, but obviously if we can get traction, both in terms of like adding tests and then fixing up flaky tests and so on, I think that's going to be huge and much easier to measure. So hopefully I'd be able to report on that next year.
Thanks, Farnaz, for sharing your insights. The question I have is, in the world of AI development, how have you organized the engineering teams in such a way where there's clear ownership as well as knowledge transfer taking place?
Yeah, some of the changes that I see is, one, we can have smaller teams, and those smaller teams, like, it's so much easier to understand the code. Like, they can own kind of a lot more and own vertically. And then the other thing that I've seen is people in our team who are, you can really easily see the correlation. People who are using some of the AI coding tools and AI agents pretty heavily, they're really good at switching between different repos, between different parts of the code, different teams, because they can ramp up really quickly. So that's really been interesting to see as well. And that has allowed us to, we all deal with this problem of, like, you have a team of 20 people, but then really you have 3 very senior engineers who can kind of play a leadership role, and you have I don't know, major launches coming in across different teams. So you get to be able to move people around much more quickly, whereas in the past it was kind of hard to get over the hump.
So with so many code generated by the AI, are you just doing anything around code reviews to catch up with that?
So we require code reviews, and
Yes, but like, have you changed how you do code reviews because of all the changes in the codes generated?
we haven't. However, we turned off the ability because initially we realized that AI is writing the code and it's reviewing the code, and that's a bit of a scary situation. So we don't allow that to happen. We do have, we kick in kind of code reviews automatically by AI, but then we make sure that afterwards there's a human actually looking at the code. We have not thought about changing the way code reviews are done, but if you have any ideas, I would love to hear it actually.
I mean, I told you earlier about like the more junior engineers pushing a lot of code, so their PRs are getting bigger and more frequent, and because they're using AI. And the experiments we had early on is like the code owners and the more senior engineers that are reviewing these PR are finding a lot of gaps and issues. So even if AI is helping you save, let's say, 50% of your time on achieving a task, we now recommend the owner or the authors of these codes, even if it was done by AI, to spend more time reviewing them, go deeper into understanding what was generated, understanding if it's meeting our quality standards and design patterns. Because otherwise it's going to go to these more senior engineers that are reviewing and spending way more time. So we interrupted a lot of PR reviews just because it got to a place where it's wasting people's time. So going back to what we did is we request from everyone, including AI, review feedback reviews or PR reviews. We also add the author or the owner a certain degree of spending that time you saved by using AI into reviewing the code as much as you can. At the end of the day, you should end up being the owner and the accountable for that code base, the same way if you had written the code yourself.
All right. I think we're going to wrap on public questions, but if folks have more questions, we have a break in between, so maybe y'all can hang back for a little bit, but let's hear it for our speakers. It's great.